Hello Sofa Squad, welcome back to the dang sofa. I hope y'all have been doing well. Today we're going to be talking about a documentary that I watched last night that's old but new on Prime, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it is called I Hate Mondays, and it is about the infamous Brenda Spencer. Now, when I watched this, I was like, oh, I forgot about this case. And so then I did my little Google thing, okay, and found out some more tea. And I was just like, you know what, we're going to have to talk about this at the damn squad. So here we are. Now, before we get into all that, I do want to say that if you like scary movies, if you like movie reviews, if you like story times or just short little movie reviews, then you need to look at my other channel. It's called A Slice, A Spice, and a Dice. There you will find my story times on movies as well as quick little movie reviews. It's a fresh channel, so give it a shot. Now, if you want even more of me, you can check out a channel membership or Patreon. There you're going to find stuff from like personal story times, topics that are too hot to dish on the main channel, as well as like absurdly hilarious criminals, aka Florida Man. So there's all that. Consider doing that. And always thank you so much to the Sofa Squad. Thank you to the mods, the Patreons, the channel members, the people who subscribe, the people who watch, who view, who comment, who like, and who share. Y'all, that little Amazon sofa wouldn't be there without y'all. Okay. Neither would this Sofa Squad member. So on that note, let's get edition on today's topic. Again, this case is about Brenda Spencer. The documentary is called I Hate Mondays. Now, it's actually a 2006 documentary, but it shows like 2021 on Amazon on Prime, whatever it is. When I was watching, I was like, have I seen this before? Why does it say 2021? So anyways, it's almost like they maybe just got rights to it or whatever, but it's there if you want to watch it. It's probably on the internet somewhere, probably here on the tubes. But that is what it is about. Now, what it is doing is it's looking back at the actual crime, but it's also looking at one of her parole hearings that she did. I believe it's the 2009 one. So there's some information in there. They talked to her mother, they talked to her father, they talked to some of the victims, they talked to the surviving family members of one of the people whose life was actually stolen, the principal. So I want to go over things that they said, and then I want to go over some of the stuff that I found out, like about where she's at these days. So let's revisit the actual day. Now, it is Monday that this occurs, January 29th, 1979, around 7 o'clock. So I'm going to put a picture up here so you can see where in relation the school was across the street from her house. I mean, it's literally right there. So like what would happen is parents would drop their kids off, the principal would come, he would unlock the gate, kids would come in. This is an elementary school, for God's sakes, it's just awful. So that's the setting. Now, apparently she had basically said, like, Dad, I don't feel good, could I like stay home today? And he was like, sure, you can stay home. And so that's, what's going on there. So she would take her rifle that she got for Christmas, we'll talk about that in a minute, and she would begin just opening fire and picking people off one by one. And she would take the lives of two people, the principal and the head custodian, and she would injure numerous children. I think like 9 or 10, 8, 9 or 10, I can't remember number-wise. So there was that. This went on for hours, okay? Obviously, cops are called in, you name it. Now, what would happen is a journalist would be able to get her on the phone, like trying to talk her down and that kind of stuff. And they're trying to make her stop. And, when pressed, like, why are you doing this? And her response was, I hate Mondays. This livens it up. There's that. Now, she would also say things like, oh, I like shooting at the ones who are wearing down jackets and seeing the feathers fly around when I hit them. I mean, just stupid comments. Like, she could have cared less. So she ends up surrendering. There's that. She goes to the court systems. Now, what she ends up doing is pleading out. She will get a sentence of like, I think it's 25 to life. And, she cops to some of the bigger charges, and they drop some of the attempted charges. So she enters the, prison industry. She is tried as an adult, because remember, she's like still in high school at this time. So this is, a young lady. And again, at this time, number one, these incidents at school were not, y'all, it was not like it was today. For a girl to have done it was like, what? The ones that had happened had typically been men. And so, but again, this level of carnage in elementary school, it was unheard of, y'all. Unheard of. Now, this whole crime, her comment about it being, I hate Mondays, would prompt a band by the name of Boomtown Rats, this is over in the UK, to write a song, and it would go to #1, and it was called I Hate Mondays. And so that kind of became synonymous. And in this documentary, like, one of the victims is saying, yeah, every time I hear that song, which she's like, I like this song, don't get me wrong, but she's like, I mean, it is what it is. You can't help but think of that day, those events. So when they show the actual, like, parole hearing that's going on, first of all, there's the shock of like, whoa, she's, prison has not been nice to her. She didn't have a lot to start with. And I mean, I'm not trying to be like petty or whatever, I guess I am. Part of the situation is she had just a very unique look, okay? To me, she just kind of seemed like someone who was like, yeah, there's something doesn't look right with her. And so then seeing her in prison where she still just had that look of like, what's going on there? So there's that. Now, we see her, she's coming to the whole, the parole thing. After you get over the shock of like what she looks like now, there is the whole aspect of like her demeanor during this. First of all, one of the things that struck me with her was her flat affect. She did kind of have just this, I'm sure she's probably on some heavy meds, I would imagine, but I don't know that for a fact. That's just me speculating. Now, obviously they're asking her questions, about the crime and things like that. She does cry at one point, and she's remorseful, she says, for what she did. She thinks this is atrocious. Now, when they were asking her, like, does she have memory of the events? And she's basically like, I have, memories of it, but they're not in sequence, and they're not, like, I don't remember, like, the moments of that. Now, that could be very true because a lot of times, like they say, in, like, extreme traumatic moments, you have, like, memory blanks and stuff. So there's that, but I'm also kind of like, that's convenient. Now, she does say, I know I did it, I just don't remember. And maybe she blocked it out because, can you imagine, like, say you did something like that, and then it was like 20 years later you're having to think back to it. I would hope my brain would block that out because it's so horrifying what you did. It's almost like the body or mind's mechanism for making it through. So, that being said, there's that. Now, they start to ask her some like other questions like about real life, like how are you going to deal with real life, yada yada. Like, number one, huge question, what are you going to do for work? Like, what are you going to do? And so she's like, well, I want to drive a forklift. And they're like, okay, and that's what apparently she did in prison at this time, was she drove a forklift. And so that's her plan, that's what she's going to do. Now, it's kind of sketchy. I guess she'll probably go to a halfway house, because when we talk about the living situation with her father, it's like, yes, sister, that ain't a place you can be going back to. Okay. Now, when they were asking about other stuff, like looking through her prison record or whatever, they were going across this thing where it was like, she had done this like mutilating type situation to herself, and apparently a relationship didn't, like a personal, like a girlfriend, whatever you want to call it, didn't go her way. And so she had taken like a paper clip and heated it up, and they said branded herself. And they said that she had done some kind of writing, and she was like, no, that's incorrect. It was actually done in runes on my chest, and it stood for like, forgotten and unforgiven. And now I can't remember the two exact words. I do believe unforgiven is one of them, but don't hold me to that. I don't remember this time. Regardless, it's not a cute look when you're going up to parole and you're trying to talk about, I can handle everyday things in life. I can get out of jail after this many years and do all this. And they're like, well, when you had a little breakup, you took a paperclip and burned your chest up. I'm not too confident that you'll do something completely sane if your breakup happens or if you lose a job. And I 100% agree. So let's talk about the times leading up to these events with her. Because here's the thing. This crime, I've always just viewed it like, I haven't really ever dug into it that much. And so I was always like, oh, this is just some girl who just seemingly randomly woke up and started doing this, to the students across the street, and was like, I hate Mondays, and, there's no reason to it why. Well, there is stuff going on besides that. And so when you start to look at some of the history, you're like, huh. Now, that does not excuse it at all, okay? I'm not saying that, but it's giving me more context besides like just a random teenager waking up and being like, I think I'll do this today. So let's talk about some of those aspects. So apparently, like in school, she did well in some things like photography and things of that nature, but she did like really poorly in other stuff. And she also had like really bad attendance, to the point that she had to start going to like a school or a facility or whatever for at-risk youth. Now, when she started going there, like the staff members and whatnot, they like did an evaluation or something like that. And they started being like, okay, red flags, number 1, number 2, number 3. And they even went as far as to say, look, she's, you know, in the realm of possibly wanting to do away with herself. There's some mental stuff going on. She really should go into a facility. And allegedly her father would not allow that to happen. So there's that. Now, at one point, Brenda was arrested for using a BB gun to shoot at that same school across the street, which is very telling. Now, at that point, also, this is when they again were like, look, she needs a psychiatric evaluation. Girl needs something, okay? And again, allegedly, her dad was like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going down that route. So, again, this is not a cute look. Like, there's all these huge red flags going off, and allegedly, just father's like, nope. No. So let's talk about the mother and the father a little bit on that note. Now, the mother, Dot Spencer, is interviewed in this. Now, she and the husband split up, and according to her, what she says is she's like, look, he came to me talking about how would you feel if I moved out for a year, and, you know, he had already rented this apartment, he was seeing other women, and she was like, fine, go on. And so she basically filed for divorce, and that was that. Now, the interviewer, the documentary guy, he's like, you know, well, why did he, the father, get custody of all the children? Because that's like not normal. And he pretty much just like point blank asked it like that. And she's like, well, the father was able to convince the older sons or whatever, the older children, that they wanted to stay with the father to the court. So they're telling the courts, we want to stay with him. And so the courts were like, well, we don't want to split up all 3 kids, so Brenda, you know, followed suit or whatever. So, and again, that's her words, that's what she's saying. I don't know if that's how it went down. I do find that odd though, but whatever. Now, also on that note, the mother is saying that she blames the father for what Brenda did, because she's like, well, the father bought Brenda the gun and like 500 rounds of ammo for Christmas. You know, she's like, clearly this person did not need that. You know, so there's all this going on. Now, the father will deny much of this. Now, in regards to the relationship that Brenda has with the mother, you fast forward to, you know, the current time of the documentary, and she's like, yeah, I haven't talked to my mom in 5 years. Like, she really didn't have much of a relationship with her, but she had formed a friendship with her father. He would come to see her every Saturday night. Saturday, not Saturday night. It could be, I don't know. But the father apparently had never sat for interviews. He had never spoken out really. And so this, you know, filmmaker was able to secure an interview with him. And the dad apparently was like, okay, look, I'll totally do this, but you can't come in the house, and we have to do it out back. Now, before we go any further, y'all, okay, honestly, the reason I made this entire video was about the information on the father, because my mouth was on the ground. I was like, what? I was like, you know. Okay, first of all, he lives in the same house across from the street, y'all. Oh my God. I was like, what? Okay, I get it, y'all. Sub sidebar. Have you ever watched, and I might need to, I don't know if I did it for Halloween or not, but I might need to revisit this. Okay, have you ever seen like haunted house things where people have haunted houses and stuff like that, and like these shows that come on TV, and they're like, oh, I wanted to leave and da-da-da, but, you know, we can't afford to. And so I'm like, God, what a horrible predicament. Like, your house is haunted, stuff's flying everywhere, ghosts are scratching your back, but you're like strapped cash-wise or whatever. So, rounded out to this, I was like, maybe he can't afford to move, because it was kind of made out that, you know, he was extremely poor. Maybe he inherited this house, I don't know, but I was just like, oh my God, I just can't imagine remaining in that home. And the school is still across the street, and in fact, when they did this interview, like, the bell rang and kids were like doing their things that kids do. And I'm like, that would haunt me. Like, I could never. Okay, I could never. So there's that, first of all. It gets worse. So they're doing the interview, and the interviewer is asking him some hard-hitting questions. You know, and the interviewer is calling out, and he's like, look, you know, basically your ex-wife blames all this on you because you got Brenda the gun, yada, yada, yada. And he's just like, it's nobody's business that I got her that. You know, he doesn't see anything wrong with that, basically. And so then, I mean, he keeps going down the rabbit hole, and he's like, well, look, you know, what's up with the fact that Brenda's saying that you abused her in a particular way that a man might do to a woman? And he's like, what? What, Brenda said that? You know, and he's like, that ain't true. And he's like, well, your ex-wife said that you and Brenda shared a bed. And he's like, well, we shared a bedroom. She had her own little mattress. You know, so he wasn't going to go, like, into that or whatever. So there's a lot of he said, she said, who knows where the truth lies. He definitely came off as kind of like, what's going on here? Like, is he intoxicated or something? Okay, so if I had any doubts about him sharing a bed with Brenda and all that kind of stuff, I'm sorry, y'all. This next bit confirmed. I was like, well, I don't know why wouldn't he? It's not a far stretch. Okay, so remember the ex-wife? She's out of the picture or whatever. He got remarried after that and had another kid. Guess who he remarried? I'll give you a sofa second to guess because you're going to hit the floor. Okay, so Brenda had a cellmate at one point, and like not a lifer, I guess. And so this girl like got out, and the girl was going to like a halfway house or whatever it is that, you know, you're going to do to integrate back into society. Well, that wasn't working or whatever, so she runs away and goes to Brenda's dad's house. You already know where this is going. Y'all, he gets her pregnant. She's 17 years old. Basically, it's like you kind of have to marry her and do that whole life, or, you know, it's not going to be good. So he gets married, she has the kid, and then she allegedly deserts both of them. The child is living with him at the time of this interview. That was 2009. They didn't talk to her. You saw her get in the truck at one point and leave. And I was like, that's why he doesn't want them in there, because it's probably squalor. And what if he's doing the same thing that he did to Brenda? You know what I mean? But so when I saw that, I was like, oh, I'm sure he was doing stuff to Brenda. You know what I mean? Because I was just like, that's really messed up. And he got real sensitive about that. He was like, we're not talking about that. She didn't want me or her kid. Like, that was all he was going to say. And I was like, yeah. Okay, so knowing all that information, again, I'm not giving that as a pass to Brenda, but I was like, okay, this is giving me context as to how we arrived to that horrible day. So now let's talk about Brenda for a second, like what she's been up to or whatever. Because again, that was 2009 that happened in, so there's like all this time that went by. Now, spoiler alert, okay, she didn't get the parole, as you might guess by now, okay? So, y'all, spoiler alert part 2, she ain't getting a parole. Okay, they're not gonna let her out, y'all. You could just listen to her introduce herself and you're like, nope, done. Just throw away the name key. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm all for somebody helping themselves, but no, something bad will come of this person being free, period. Okay, so in 2020, Brenda Spencer joined what is called the Golden Girls Club at the facility that she's in. And so, for sidebar, I feel like they kind of decimated the Golden Girls name. Just pure, well, you know what, all over it. I was just like, do we have to call it that? Now I'm going to like associate the two, but whatever. So it's called the Golden Girls Club. Now this club it's a 55 and older community. It's very nice. There's no kids running around the neighborhood. I'm just joking. So what it is though, is it's stuff that's geared towards aging populations of prison. And so some of the things that you get, like the perks, if you will, of this club are as follows. So you get like what's called a front of the line pass for like medication, the dining hall. You get to eat in a certain dining hall that's like closest to the unit. Little things like that. You get bottom bunk privileges, like you get first say if you want the bottom bunk. Things that clearly are made to help the older population, you know, with things that happen even if you're on the outside getting older. So she joined that club. She's real excited. She's real happy. Now she, like I said, has been denied parole numerous times. She's back up for it in 2021. Y'all, I can tell you she ain't getting it. they're not going to give it to her. I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's just like the Manson people where I'm like, they're not going to give it to any of the surviving Manson girls in jail. It's just too horrible of a crime, and it's way too political. Now, Brenda's father did die back in 2016. He was aged 87 at that point. Now, in the documentary, they also talked to like some of the surviving victims, as well as the late wife and daughter of the principal. And they had a lot of insight because basically they were just like, yeah, I mean, she's a monster, you know. And the girl was talking about what that day was like, and my heart just broke for her because she was like, first of all, seeing it on TV over and over and over and over, and you're like, oh my God, that was my dad. And she was like, when we went to go get my dad's stuff from the school, like his blood was still on the sidewalk, and I'm like, oh my God, that is just heartbreaking. I felt so bad for her. And then she was also like, you know, I found myself all day long waiting for my dad to come home so I could tell him what happened. And she's like, I kept catching myself. And you know how that is when you lose someone close to you and that happens, and it gives me goosebumps. My heart broke for her. Now, her and her mother have since passed, but obviously they were very vocal and trying to keep Brenda from getting paroled. Now, the two surviving sons, they don't like to speak of it publicly, so they, you know, are just kind of quiet. So, and I can completely respect that. Now, there is a granddaughter of the girl, and she was basically like, look, you know what? I grew up knowing like this is a person to fear. You know, whenever the parole time would come up, it would get very edgy around the house and the family. And obviously she wasn't alive when this happened. She was 26 years old at the time I read this, or the time of the article, the interview she did. And so that just goes to show, look at how these people victimize generation after generation after generation. And that's why I just feel like some of these things, I'm like, I'm all for rehabilitation, but come on. So that is the story of Brenda Spencer and the little documentary. I'll put a link in the description if you want to watch it. Check it out. Thank you, everybody, for being here and making the Sofa Squad possible, as always. And be on the lookout for some other videos coming up, and check out the other channels I talked to you about. And until next time, I'll see you then.